Civic Center Advisory Committee meeting of August 11th, 2014. Could we have roll call, please?
Sure. Steve Dostart,
Please excuse absent.
Dee Dee Fisher,
Excuse absent.
Rose Howe,
Here.
Phil Lively,
Excuse absent.
Clyde Murray,
Here.
Paul Cornell, here, Christine David,
Here.
Rick DeGolia, and Mr. Lewis. Okay, we have the city manager, city clerk, and Tom Fortin said he would be unable to make today's meeting. And then we have our two consultants. I'm not sure, some of you may not have met our consultants. Why don't I wait till Rick comes
Yeah, I see
in?
Rick coming in.
Next week. That was next week.
Yeah.
We did have a report.
I just sent you a text, you can just.
I know, I saw it.
Oh.
So let me introduce Mark Kelly. Mark is the principal of MAC 5, our project management firm. He'll also be doing the cost estimating for us. And Paul Beamer is the senior project manager with MAC 5, and he's going to be our project manager. Paul is also a licensed architect, so he's going to be especially helpful in the design process.
Congratulations, we're glad to have you.
Thank you.
It's great.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, big job.
I'd like to add that, Bill, Clive, and myself, we were involved with the project management selection subcommittee, and, there are a lot of good firms that these guys stood out, and we're really happy that they're on board now as to do things.
Is this number right?
Thank you.
Oh, I'm supposed to continue. Okay, public comments. Seeing that there's nobody from the public here, we will on number 2. And approval of the minutes of, it was the May minutes, I believe, so we got copies of. Do we have any comments, corrections, or anything to add to those minutes? On behalf of Steve, he passed on something. Item number 6, he preferred the reading to include something regarding time, that the agenda packet would come to us prior to the meeting so that we would have adequate time for review rather than having a rush situation. So just adding a time,
Is it, was that something, I don't, that's something he had said at the time, I think it might have been.
Yeah.
So the question is, do we correct the
Did we
minutes
yeah,
or put it in the current minutes?
put it in the current minutes. Okay, that's
Do
fine.
that. Thank you.
Yeah, he had a lot to say, so.
Maybe I'll include that under, if you don't mind, I'll include that under committee member comments.
Okay. Other than that, would anybody like to approve the minutes of that meeting? Would you like to make a I'll make the motion to approve the meeting. Would you like to second it? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passed. Okay, regular agenda. Review staff report and discussion, architect selection.
Okay. I will be happy to present the staff report and tell you that a lot of the information is from our consultants. We met for 2.5 hours the previous week and 2.5 hours last week and to discuss this issue. And they are recommending, at our July meeting, I had said that I could have an RFP prepared for your review at this meeting. We met with that as a goal, and while they didn't exactly talk me out of it, they did suggest there's some positive reasons to do a 2-step process of a request for qualifications, followed by a request for proposal. And I'm sure they'll be happy to augment it, but basically, I think the main reason was doing a request, doing a proposal for an architectural firm is a fairly significant effort. Those of you who've been involved with them know that. And they were suggesting that the economy is pretty hot here in Silicon Valley and San Francisco. And if you want to get good quality firms, those that are going to be willing to put the effort in would like to do so knowing that they have a reasonable shot at it. if you have 25 firms that submit proposals, just the statistics are 4%, chance. So they were suggesting that we instead follow a request for proposal process, which then is wide open to the entire world. It includes, and I'd say I have probably 15 firms on the list of firms that, and I've gotten some input from Vice Mayor DeGolia, I've gotten input from others. I have some knowledge, these gentlemen have also, especially Paul, provided some suggestions of names we went over last week. So we certainly send out to that. We do a very wide advertisement, including through the web and through services that send out notifications to prospective bidders or proposers. So we might get, as we did with the architectural process in the master plan, we got 8 firms. Very quickly, the committee went through those and were able to winnow them down to these 4 as being well qualified. So I would say that kind of somewhat similar to that process, but rather you get just the statement of qualifications rather than focused on our project as a first step. The council must approve any solicitations. So we go to council in September, go out. An SOQ can be done very quickly because it doesn't require learning all about the program, writing about it, showing that they demonstrate their knowledge, and then most importantly, putting together that all important matrix that has all the qualifications of their individuals with the hours they're going to spend by phase, plus their sub-consultants and negotiating all that. So it's a lot of work. After which the committee would review those, and I would think you'd operate as a committee of the whole, as you've done previously, get all those statements of qualification, winnow them down to the 3, 4, 5 that you believe are well qualified, and then invite those firms to propose. And I think Steve had some input, which you might want to bring up.
Well,
Anyway, so that's kind of my brief staff presentation. Paul and Mark would be happy to augment that if you wish.
Great, thank you, Gordon. Well, I have a couple of questions, and then I will go into, I spoke to Steve after, the email, and I think there was just a concern. His concern was, why are we doing it this way? Isn't it more efficient to just go out once? Are we putting these people through the ringer? And, that coincides with my question. How common is this to go out in 2 days? How successful is it? Does it really weed out people, or does it turn people off that they have to turn around and come back and redo the scope? How does that, what's the mechanism?
The benefit is that you're not defining the scope of your project quite yet. All you're doing is looking at their side. How qualified are they to do a civic center for you? Mm-hmm. So it allows you to weed out a lot of the players and get down to a list of those that you feel are aesthetically or technically competent to do a civic center or a police station or a library at this scale. If there are issues about green building initiatives, you can get their qualifications right away. And then when you go out to a much smaller group for the RFP, then you're not looking or evaluating dozens of proposals. You're down to a very small group, which is much more efficient when it comes to your project, because when the RFP goes out, we'll have had enough time to screw down to what is really important about this project and make sure that statistically we're not going to get hit with change orders from those design teams once they are signed on.
So while they're working on the RFQ, then we continue, or we start working on the scope as a team and revisit the police, library, Atherton, and all that, and that work continues and goes on.
Yeah, and there's also the issue of the potential issue of subterranean parking is a potential issue,
right,
or a net zero campus, another potential issue that would have an impact. The garage, not so much, but a net zero facility is you bring in more consultants, different types, not significantly more, but enough.
Mm-hmm.
So having a good scope of work defined is better for getting a more competitive price.
No, I agree. So I was concerned about getting the scope down in order to make sure that we avoid the change orders and all that.
And with respect to a lot of firms putting this together, most of them have a marketing crew person, department, that will outgo the qualifications, so it's relatively easy for them to put that together.
Right. Right. Well, I spoke to Gordon about this prior to this meeting, and I was satisfied. I've not done it this way before, but I was satisfied with the explanation, and it made sense because, number one, we're not ready to have the scope defined yet either ourselves. That would take some time. And I think Steve's concern was, is this holding us back? Is this creating more work for the consultants, that some of them will be turned off by turning around and doing it twice? And I think that the way you've described it, that it's just sort of a narrowing, winnowing down of the selection makes sense. We will, select from however many. I suspect for the RFQ, there should be quite a number of firms, interested. And it's just a matter of saying these people stand out and let them do the work afterwards and bid on it.
You also get a perspective of the work that's out there, right? So you can see it from different firms in different locales, different types, and I think that helps the selection committee also start to hone what it is, what are we really looking for? Remember this building by such and such architects?
Right.
Things like that. There are benefits to it that way in terms of broadening a perspective and deepening the knowledge about it.
Okay. And again, I spoke to Steve, and I think that we're all on the same page, he and I think everybody else is that once we get some of these proposals, we just want enough time to review it. We don't want to be told, here it is, you've got to evaluate it in 3 days. And I'm looking at you, but that's not really, I should be looking at George. George's not looking at me. So you saw the emails. He just wants more time, and I think many of us do. When we did the PM, I could have used a few more days. We're not asking for much more time, maybe 2 weekends instead of 1 weekend. People have things to do, but we want to do this right. And when we're talking about a few weeks, I don't think that matters in the overall schedule. So I think that was the point he was trying to make on this email. So I know you heard that, but he again asked me to confirm that in the meeting. So, okay, good. I told Steve, I don't have a problem with this two-phase system. I never did. But I understand when somebody's not familiar with it. It was basically because I had a conversation with Gordon before and Steve didn't. So it makes sense to me. If you're comfortable with it, as our advisors at this point, I would feel comfortable that this would be manageable and it might work better even. So.
You might get better results by doing it this way. Those firms that can easily send out their qualifications without having to go through all the homework of putting the proposal together.
Right.
They get a sense of that the project is viable, and that if they're shortlisted, then they can focus only on your project for the proposal.
Okay.
So just as a point of clarification, the RFQ is going to just kind of funnel down the number of RFPs that we receive and have to review, correct? So for a firm that's going to do both, what would be the essential differences between what they're going to submit for the RFQ and the RFP? Or
Just half.
okay,
The RFQ is their side of the equation, and then the RFP is the project side of the equation. You'd have to do both eventually, but you wouldn't have to rush it this way. And you might even get some better quality proposals because, like Gordon was alluding to, if you've got 24 firms, it's like your percentage of getting in under the wire. This way, there's a much smaller group that, well, you've got higher probability of getting the project if it's only 8 firms rather than 24.
right. Just want to make sure I understood it correctly as far as the process.
I have a question. So from the city's perspective, if we go out and get a couple dozen responses to the RFQ, we can then limit the number of RFPs
To that list of
to that list of people. That seems like a big advantage to
Absolutely.
me, because we saw the process with the project manager, we didn't do a two-step thing, and we got a lot of responses, probably more than we really expected. And it was, I thought it was a challenge. It was harder than selecting the master plan consultants because of that. And I can imagine that would be true if we went through the same thing, so.
Same thing.
One of the other advantages that I was recommending, and also after discussion with Matt 5, was the statement of qualifications, just because it doesn't have, as Paul said, the program side of things, it has their side of things, here's our people, here's what we've done, we've done this here, done this there. It's not gonna be as thick
Right.
as that. So the effort, and those of you who review the project management, I spent from Friday solidly through Sunday. My wife said, "What are you reading again?" Yeah, okay, because it was a lot of work to read those. You will have many, but they'll be thinner, and you can focus on them. Then when you get to the proposals, you can really, however many you do, whether it's 3, 4, 5, 6, you really can focus on the program itself. How are they responding to our needs? So, the total pages may be more, but the focus on what's important to Atherton should be able to be done with a much smaller and more succinct group.
So am I hearing this, it sounds to me like if we did it this way, that those that are quoting against the RFP, is that the second one?
Yes.
The second one?
Proposal.
Would have a greater sense of, they would work a lot harder and put a lot more thought into it because they realize there are fewer of them being considered and they're seriously in this to potentially get the business. So they put a lot more effort into it.
And they feel
That's great.
getting over the first hurdle, knowing that they're winnowed down to, a few competitors. That's a whole different story than you and whoever
20
else is
others,
out there.
yeah.
Okay, so my comment is, I think it's a good idea to do this. By coincidence, in my other life, doing consulting work, I'm actually going through an RFP process now to select an architectural firm for a client, to provide architectural services on a national basis. It's a different type of account. But when I talk to architectural firms, the first question they ask me is how many people are gonna be submitting a proposal. And there's a couple of issues around that. One is it's extremely expensive to produce a good quality RFP. It can cost as much as $50,000 to prepare a high quality RFP. Certainly it'll be over $20,000. So this is, and if you're going into it, as Gordon said, with maybe a 5% chance of being selected, you don't say, well, maybe I just won't put as much effort into it. You just won't do it.
Right, exactly.
There is so much work out there right now that if we go out there with a shotgun approach, trying to get proposals from every company that's marginally qualified, the best firms are likely not to even submit. Whereas if we wait and go through this and then they know that there's only at most 4 to 6 firms that are being considered, then it's a worthwhile consideration for them. So I support the approach.
It would seem to me, I've not done this before, but that in receiving the RFQs, it's going to be pretty evident which firms would be, or at least which some of the firms would be eliminated, just by looking at their qualifications, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Instead of just having to sit through the entire RFP, you get those RFQs and you're like, well, this is not a fit, it's not a match. Right, okay.
As an example, several of you didn't review the program management. We had one firm, it's a firm I've worked with for many years. They're a nationally known project management firm. I won't mention the name. Did a very nice proposal. It was beautiful, full color and all. And all the projects they showed were in, or almost all of them, I think, were in the southeast United States. They're beautiful projects, but I'm thinking, what does a project in Georgia, which has a very different climate, different energy, different aesthetic, how is that? And plus, the people that worked on that project in Georgia are highly unlikely to be moving to California by their company to work on that project. So it was one that I didn't rank very highly, despite having had great experience with them elsewhere. And I think the team concurred in that. And they made the ranking really. I was ready to jump in and say, well, here's my thought, but I didn't need to because they came up with them completely independently, and so it was easy for me. So that's the kind of example I would give.
So is this agenda item to approve the two-step process? or is it to approve the two-step process and the proposed form of RFQ?
Maybe I can, maybe I could say, I put it together as to approve the two-step process here, because the committee has another meeting before the city council.
Oh, that's true,
To
because
do,
we're not meeting in August.
exactly, and
Okay.
which made it somewhat easier, so I.
So you could bring the RFQ to the meeting next week.
Exactly, now you have a month to look at it, have comments about it, et cetera. By the way, in terms of timing, that was one of the issues, and I have no problem certainly, however the committee wants to do it, but I was also trying to match the schedule of the council with the rest of the process. So sometimes, us meeting on the second Monday may mean only a few days after your decision to complete the work in order to get an agenda item to the city manager for his review, so that he can then get to the council for their process.
And a contract to the city attorney, which is 10 days in advance of that.
Well, we were in a situation where, I think with the PM or something, this is a big lessons learned. We were saying, we've got to do this, we want to, hurry up, because, and nobody said hurry up, but we've got to do this by this day so we can bring it to council on this day. And the turnaround, as you said, it was so severe. If we did not approve anything, that would have just blown the whole month, and that burden was on us. So if there's any other way to structure this, that the turnaround isn't quite so.
Well, I'll address that one. We can send information to the committee for you to take a look at, much like you've got the RFQ here today. And you can provide feedback during the meeting, or you can provide feedback directly to Gordon. The challenge is you can't provide feedback in and amongst yourselves and discuss it outside of the win.
Right.
So when we provide you information and say, hey, give us some feedback, we're happy to provide that in as much advance time as possible to get you some time with it, to get some feedback to Gordon. But you don't get the benefit of the public discussion.
Right.
The only way to have that is to have a meeting.
Right, and I don't think that the issue is the public discussion, it's just getting it in our hands. I'm kind of used to this being on planning commission, we get the, package Friday afternoon and you turn it
Right.
around. But others would rather, because of their schedule, they haven't bought into, that's not what they bought into. They need some time to review this, they take this very seriously. And it's just a time, allocation issue. So, I think that was the whole purpose of this weekend's,
Yeah.
stuff. That we, there are those who would want more time because maybe they do have something to do that weekend. Maybe they are gone that weekend. So I don't know how you're gonna coordinate that, in the future, but, that was the comment.
Yeah, well, the agendas, as I think I mentioned in that email exchange, we'll get those out on Thursday with a full packet and a full set of information.
Right.
But if somebody's not ready to be disseminated, we can't send it out. Because once it's public, and, we have the public in the room, and if they wanna look at it, it's gotta go to them at the same time it goes to the committee, and if it ain't ready, we ain't sending it out.
Right.
But we'll get the agenda packets along with all the materials out by Thursday prior to your meeting. But if it's something like this RFQ or the work on the RFP, if we can announce it at one meeting, say, hey, here it is, you have a month to provide some feedback before the next meeting, or just shy of a month. Get that feedback to Gordon. Just be careful you don't copy multiple members, because that'll be a problem.
No, you can emphasize that again
Yeah.
too, and I think that's worth stating again, as a reminder.
And I think if I may, for a couple processes that were done before, I was able to collect the information. I remember we met in the conference room there a few months ago. I collected it all, and you said, well, I remember Steve saying, well, why don't you draft this?
Right.
We'll send it out, and I did. So I can send it out, as another iteration also of the committee.
Right. And all this means is we just wanted, this quick turnaround, was a little stressful for people. I think that if there's any way that you describe, meeting and going through you, or some other ways in the interim, I think that's why Steve brought up the subcommittee, that worked well. That's another situation. I'm not convinced it's going to work well here because I think the architectural selection needs the entire CCAC buy-in, and that's going to be a little bit more cumbersome. And again, as you develop the schedule based on this two-step system, if you can keep in mind, again, this time for us to evaluate things, especially when we get to the RFP, that's gonna be the big time consuming thing, that we don't want one weekend to have to look through.
And this isn't something you want to rush.
Exactly, and there's no need to, there's just no need to. Okay, I think I covered that. Pardon?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem, no problem. So, I mean, I see that on our agenda today, there's item under Gordon's report, changes to meeting schedule. Maybe we should just, since that's scheduled on the public schedule, our agenda, we should discuss whether the second Tuesday of the month is the right, or the second Monday of the month is the right meeting date for the committee, given that the proximity to the council meeting. Maybe it'd be, I'm not suggesting we discuss it now because there's an agenda item, but we could address it.
But I think that's a very good suggestion, but I think that once everybody's back in town, half the team is gone, that would solve some of the problems,
Right.
Korea.
Well, we could just discuss it, but
We can
we've
discuss
got an
it.
agenda item, that's my point.
Yeah, we can discuss it.
So I have a question for Gordon. And looking at the staff report here for the RFQ, RFP, I was wondering if we could kind of go over the timeline, or both timelines, and if we could discuss those. That is the item we're on, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Sure. And some of it will be dependent on the issue that Rick just brought up, as well as what Rose said, that if the committee, actually, Rick, there's another copy here for the gentleman in the back. You wanna pass that down?
Excuse me. Thank you.
Thanks.
Here you go.
We put the schedule together assuming an expeditious process, shall we say. I've got no problems. I mean, it certainly makes life easier for me too, to have more time to do that. So I put the schedule together assuming that the committee was going to continue to meet on a once-a-month basis, and that we have certain deadlines in order to get things to city council for their approval. So the RFQ would come back to the committee next month, assuming you say, yes, let's go ahead with that. And if there's any input during this month, I'll be, as the city manager said, I'd be pleased to have that so I can incorporate it. Then council would approve things on the 17th, it would go out. An RFQ can typically have less time on the street than a request for proposal, because as Paul said, it's their marketing team that
Right.
just pulls it together. So if you give them a couple of weeks, that comes back, then however much time the committee wants to review those, if you don't think you can do it in 3 or 4 days and get things done, we can add a week or 2 weeks, you can add a special meeting. The only times, I can't change the times of the council meeting, so in order, if the committee wants to hit a certain council meeting, in order to
Things
get
might
that
have to be
approval.
modified.
Right, exactly. So this assumed it was gonna go to the council for, approval of the teams in October. Then the RFP would go out at the same time. That would come in November. The committee as a whole would meet, interview those shortlisted groups of architects in order to get it, a selection made in well enough beforehand so that we could negotiate a contract, have it through the city attorney's review, and get it to the council for their December meeting. Or depending, if the negotiations took longer, and I will say with HMC, there was quite a bit of back and forth in terms of defining exactly the scope that we wanted, the number of neighborhood meetings, and even then we modified it slightly. So, this assumes that's gonna take a little bit longer and get the council at their meeting in January. The RFP, we figured, just because it is not a two-step process, might be able to meet, to achieve selection of the team 1 month short.
Right,
I
short
will
time.
point out, and my colleagues here put a schedule together that you have, that assume we could get everything done by December for both of them. So, and I don't dispute that, so it's not really two tremendously different versions of it, it's just slightly different assumptions as to how quickly the committee could, come together and make decisions. So December, January, it's not a
Okay.
huge difference.
So this first timeline is if we're issuing an RFQ and the RFP.
Correct.
The second timeline, which sounds like we might be able to eliminate, is strictly if we just sent out an RFP.
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure I
So
understood that.
what would help me is, this schedule is sort of, doesn't really mean a lot without knowing the key dates. So would it be possible to like tell us what dates we're trying to hit, with CCAC, council meetings, how long you're allowing for the RFQ process?
I think it would, and I think it might be helpful to look at the schedule that you have as the last item of your agenda. Okay, so it has the, today's date, CCAC approves architect RFQ. Now, Paul assumed that you would approve that today. Again, not necessary, but in terms of milestones, we have, we have a due date, we have the council approval of a Wednesday, 9/17. That's item 23, so that's a milestone, council approval. Then the RFQ, then you have line 26, another milestone, council approving the RFP.
What's the first milestone, Gordon?
The first one is the council meeting on 9/17, it's number 23.
Gotcha.
Then you look at 26 again, it's another milestone as determined by council date.
So between 25 and 26, you looked at the CCAC.
Well, when I say evaluate SOQ and shortlist, that is the CCAC. I just didn't put